car certainly isn't typical of most of the vehicles stored here, although it is indeed the sort of car that Tiff conducts most of his business in. It's the Nimron Aston Martin that he shared with AJ Foyt at Daytona in the early 80s before he became a regular Porsche driver. Now, early this year, he was out in Florida challenging Jaguar's attempt to repeat their success in the Daytona 24-hour race, some compensation along with their Le Mans win for losing their World Championship to the Mercedes Silver Arrows. Tony Mason went along to observe sports car racing American style.
It's been true since racing began. In order to finish first you've got to finish. So at the start of a 24-hour race, you don't charge off flat out as though it was a 10-lap club event. But American TV's only covering the first half hour live, and once the green flag drops, the old red mist doesn't half cloud the reason. So the white Jaguar number 2 was in there fighting with its rivals for a bit of fleeting glory at the front. In fact, although Mercedes wasn't at Daytona, the main opposition still came from Germany in the shape of the black Porsche driven by the famous Andretti family and the Jost Porsche number 6 put on pole position by Frenchman Bob Wallach. Porsche had won this race 17 times, but their 962 model first appeared here in 1984 and was expected to be blown off by the favourites, the high-tech teams from Jaguar and Nissan. The Nissans, champions in American sports car racing for the last 3 years, were to be the Hares. Running to European as opposed to US rules, they were gambling more power and lower weight for less fuel and much slower refuelling. As a result, they would need to run 2 seconds a lap quicker throughout. At the start, Julian Bailey's spin spoilt the game plan a bit, but he was confident.
Our car's running well. Even if it rains, the car's very good in the rain. But here, one of the biggest problems is all the traffic. You know, there's so many slow cars, and it's just going to be a bit of a lottery. But we hope we can stay there.
Fellow Brit Derek Warwick in the Jaguar was equally confident.
I think the package is good. You know, we got a good team here with TWR and Jaguar. And, you know, as long as the weather stays good, you know, we have a known package and we know we can do a good job.
But the weekend had started badly for Jaguar, with a spin in the wet in practice. John Nielsen was just badly shaken, but the car was wrecked and half Jaguar's effort was spent. That didn't seem to worry Davy Jones in the sister car as he jockeyed for position through the traffic in the first hectic stint.
I was actually having a lot of fun. You know, I think that the Andretti Porsche and the Bob Wallach Porsche, I think they had a little boost turned up, so they were quite a bit quicker down the straight. But then when the Nissan came in, the 4 of us, we were having a lot of fun. I think we were all very professional at what we were doing and being very careful on every move, but we all were racing out there.
Though strong in Europe, both German Porsche teams had little US experience, and so the Rob Dyson Porsche number 16 stood a very good chance, especially as they'd taken on our man Tiff Needell, third behind the Jaguars at Le Mans last year.
We are probably the most experienced Porsche team in America racing, as opposed to Andretti and Answers are quite new teams, and so is Yost, really. So we reckon the Jaguar's only one left, that'll break down, Nissan's loaded transmission problems, and then it'll be a Porsche race, and Dyson will be the best Porsche.
That sounds like being confident to me.
Easy job. All I've got to do is keep out of the puddles and keep on the black bit, and yes.
What about the weather?
Well, it is going to be the big story of the race, I think. I mean, it's so changeable, and we're all very worried about what it might do to us.
The weather was keeping everyone guessing before the start, but the professionals have all the angles covered. How do you read the weather, Tony?
I'll read it. Pick up my bit of paper. It says, what's the time? 3 o'clock. Rain or showers, light rain and light rain. So
you believe that, do you?
To the minute. The guy is very, very good.
Sure enough, the rain came down at the predicted hour, and with everyone tiptoeing round on slick tyres, the pace car came out to slow everything down.
2.5 hours into the race, and it'll soon be very dark. Now, this isn't the Florida we expected. No sunshine, just big black clouds and heavy rain. The cars have all come in, they've changed tyres, but the order is very much as expected. The Nissan's fighting it out with the Jaguar up there, and Tiff's team just behind them.
John Paul dived in as soon as it rained, and we got onto wet tyres about the first car to get onto wet tyres. The leaders were still floundering around, you know, in the wet on slicks, and we think we got ahead of them on a quick pit stop, but the organisers don't agree.
Now it's your turn to go out. Shouldn't you be going now?
Well, no, because when they stopped to put the wet tyres on, they filled it back up with fuel again, so it means John Paul will do sort of 1.5 stints.
Anyway, otherwise everything will go into plan, is it?
Yeah, I never wanted to drive in the daylight anyway. I mean,
Daytona is unlike Le Mans in a number of ways, and one of them is the lack of daylight. Instead of 5 or 6 hours of darkness in French midsummer, it's 12 hours at least of Floridian February night, and it starts barely 4 hours in.
How's it going, Tony?
Yeah, it seems to be going fine. We just had a driver change and you know, new tyres and fuel, about a 31-second stop, which is a couple of seconds slower than what we like, but I mean in these conditions that's not bad at all.
And your weather forecasting paper is on schedule and working, is it?
You can see that, can't you?
It was completely dark and still very wet when Tiff came to take over from John Paul. But the conditions don't necessarily limit one's enjoyment.
It was good. Car ran pretty good. We have very good downforce putting the power down off the corners. It doesn't spin the wheels like most everyone else, so we can get the shots off the corners. It's fun.
Pretty slippery out there, though.
Yeah, it's nice to be in a motor race.
The spectators likewise seemed content to sit out the rain with warmth, food and for some good shelter. But the pace doesn't slacken, and keeping out of each other's way can produce some exciting moments.
I had a days of thunder with the Jaguar on the bank.
I don't know what happened. You got a plane, all of a sudden you left him.
Well, he stayed down low, we were catching. I had the slingshot, but he tried to come up, and I was like, we hit. I was right up on the wall.
Tiff's stint was cut short with brake problems, the pedal needing to be pumped to get any response. But the fluid could hardly be boiling in these conditions. And so on through the night, with the lead contested by the lone Jaguar, the two Nissans held back by their slow pit stops, and the two leading Porsches of Tiff's team and poleman Bob Wallach.
12 hours gone, halfway through, and a very different event from last year, for the racing is still neck and neck. And that's taken its toll on the big cat, the Jaguar. It had been leading for a long time, but it's now started overheating and has been pushed behind the pits for major surgery. And we've just heard that the car that's inherited the lead, Wallach's Porsche, has got similar problems, and it looks as though he's out. But there is one bit of good news, at least it stopped raining.
So the front row of the grid was eliminated with overheating, probably the result of the unrelenting pace. Last year, the Jaguars had the race more or less won by midnight. This year was different. It took 90 minutes to replace the water pump and get the car back in the race, but 2 hours later, it was the same story, and that meant doing it all again.
Daytona. Shine your light on me.
Dawn at Daytona, and it looks as though it could be a nice morning, although there are some menacing clouds lurking about. Now the campers are starting to wake up to find that there's still very close racing to watch. 450 laps have been completed by the leaders, but the race is only 2/3 of the way through, and the situation still very fluid.
Barely an hour later, the long faces in the Dyson pit meant one solid development. With James Weaver driving, the Porsche's engine had let go, and it was curtains for Tiff and all at number 16.
It's unusual in a long race like this to have trouble with a Porsche. They're normally so reliable. But this race now is a 24-hour sprint race. If you don't go flat out, somebody else will. And normally the Porsche is the best car for that, so it's one of those things.
Oh, look, this is a tough race to win, you know. I mean, you can lose it easy, but it's a hard run to win.
Oh, well, what happens now to you?
I'll go home. Have a nice breakfast in the shower, and then off home, I think.
With 8 hours still to run, the race was now between the two Nissans and Porsche, with the second Yost car number 7 and the black Andretti 00. But with all the car problems, you could say the circuit was winning.
150 feet up here in the sky on top of the main grandstand, and you really get the feeling of this amazing racetrack. It was built for American NASCAR racing, where the monstrous saloons charge around the tri-oval track at average speeds of nearly 200 miles an hour. The infield gives the sports cars a little more work to do, and while the top speeds are just the same, it does mean that the average comes down to a slightly less hair-raising 125.
The next team to show the strain was Nissan, with pretty serious problems for Julian Bailey.
Well, it's unfortunate because we were leading at 7:30 quite comfortably. We had one tyre blow, which wasn't too bad, so the driver came in, Harry Lundijk, swapped drivers, I got in the car, and after about 5 laps the gearbox went, so now we have to change gearbox, which is going to basically lose us the race, but it's a shame really, because we were leading.
But they weren't the only ones in trouble. The dour Porsches for the Unsers and the Andrettis had had little time to prepare, and it showed. The Unsers went out with no replacement nose, and Mario Andretti suffered innumerable problems.
Some of those things you can expect in a 24-hour race. A little bit of luck. I think we could have won this thing. Just, we're not the only ones saying that, however.
The banking really tests cars and drivers. After rain, it dries much quicker than the flat infield, so that wet weather tyres needed there tend to overheat in the banked turns.
You wouldn't find me up here during the race, but I couldn't resist coming to find just how steep it is. As you can see, I'm having difficulty standing up, and that's not surprising because it's got an angle of 31 degrees, and that's steep.
This is the only place in the world where sports cars compete on a banked track, but it didn't seem to bring in the crowds. That's more to do with the cars than the circuit, though. As for the Daytona 500 stock car race, every seat is taken. Nevertheless, there were 30,000 spectators present, but they were mainly in the infield, where barbecues and booze seemed to be as important as the racing. With the best will in the world, the crowd didn't look much like potential luxury car buyers, but Jaguar weren't principally appealing to race fans.
The people we sell to average almost $200,000 a year in income. Follows they're well-educated, they're intelligent people, they're people who have strong drives themselves, and even though most of them perhaps don't go motor racing or even watch motor racing, they like to think they're buying things from winners because they're winners themselves. So therefore, if we can find a way of winning, and obviously Jaguar has with motor racing, then it's something that we can put into our advertising which greatly appeals to a wide range of customers.
Jaguar's dream of 3 wins in 4 years at Daytona had faded, and Nissan's hope of a first 24-hour success also faltered with 7 stops to repair damaged bodywork. So the race didn't go to the fancied Nissan Hare, but the reliable Porsche Tortoise, shared by drivers with virtually unparalleled success in endurance racing.
If I can win it today, this will make 5 wins at this racetrack, and nobody's ever done that. It would also give me the lead in the all-time, the classic races, which is here, Daytona and Le Mans.
For Henri Pasquarolo, it was a first win at Daytona to add to his 4 at Le Mans.
It's quite different, but long-distance race, it's very similar. You must really feel what is going on with the car, and you must not drive as you like, but as the car like,
So Tiff's predictions proved accurate, except it wasn't his Porsche that ended up in victory lane. Still, he gleaned a certain consolation from the weekend.
We'd actually been leading for about 50 laps in the middle of the night, which was a wonderful experience, just to go past the tower and look up and see the number on the top of the tower. But it was better to have led and lost than to have never led at all, I've decided.
Well, I'm sure we all wish Tiff better luck next time. That's about it for this week. I've been sanctioned to enjoy myself for a while in this very red Ferrari. The owner's got half a dozen other baubles quite like it to play with. But this particular car actually won the 1959 Tour de France before it was given this special Drogo body. Next week we test rather more homely transport in the shape of the new Mazda 121, and we look at the Peugeot Challenge designed to foster new rallying talent. See you then. Until then, drive as safely as I'm about to.